All right, so, which brings us halfway down page 195, to fasting and abstinence. This is important because for some reason, I thought everybody really knew that fasting was one thing and abstinence was another. Ahem. That's okay, in her old age she's getting deaf too and she doesn't know I've started clapping. Maybe both of them. Okay, so we're talking about now fasting and abstaining, and that they're not the same thing. And some of you may go, well, I know they're not the same thing, and other ones will go, well, what's the difference? Because I'm always getting this, well, I broke my fast on Friday, and I said, well, there was nothing obliging you to fast on Friday. Oh, well, I ate meat. I didn't fast from meat. I go, that's abstaining. That is not fasting. So, there is a difference between fasting and abstinent from flesh meat. The law of fasting commands that there should be only one full meal in the day, but it does not forbid us to take some food in the morning and evening, if we keep the approved local custom regarding its quantity and quality. Meat may be eaten at the principal or main meal on a fast day, unless it is also an abstinence day. And actually, right now in the church, the only fast days that are left are also abstinence days, so there's kind of no question. It was in the old days, you had different days that were fasting, but they weren't fasting and abstinence. So sometimes these were depicted by a half of a fish on the calendar, something like that, which meant you could have meat with one of the meals, but not with all of them, or one up with the meal, principal meal, or even maybe instead one of the snacks and not the meal. But you couldn't have it all day long. What is allowed by custom in the morning and evening is made known in each diocese when the regulations are published, usually at the beginning of Lent each year. In the United States, the following is generally the approved local custom. In addition to the one full meal, 2 smaller meals or snacks may also be eaten, sufficient to maintain one's strength, but together they should not equal one's normal full meal. No food may be taken between meals, but liquids, including milk and juice, may be taken between meals. So this does not mean you can put a pizza into the Vitamix, make a liquid out of it, and then say, well, I'm not breaking the fast. You could tell this has occurred to me. The real pizza smoothie. Well, the Vitamix will do it, anything you put in there. The law of abstinence from flesh meat forbids us to eat meat or soup made from meat, and in general, products made from meat. So, it doesn't mean you have to, I think, be overly scrupulous, but there are things that, like, have beef broth or something as a normal component. Like, French onion soup, for example, looks otherwise innocent, right? It's got what? Onions in it, and it's got cheese and some brown liquid and everything. So I don't see any meat in there. Well, the brown liquid in French onion soup is beef broth. So that's why you can't have something like that. You can make it with vegetables as well. So, flesh meat goes into a little bit about the definition of that, because people go, well, isn't fish meat? Well, I guess in kind of a way it is, Fish is sort of fish meat, but you can still eat fish meat. You can't eat flesh meat. So you could eat tuna, but you couldn't have whale, for example. Huh? Well, whale is a mammal, and they have red meat, just like,
But frogs are mammals as well.
No, frogs are amphibians.
Oh, they're amphibians, right.
I don't know the law on amphibians, but it tastes just like chicken. It's probably flesh meat anyway. Frogs. Well, their legs are an awful lot like chicken.
Read on, it's right here.
Really?
The last paragraph at the bottom.
That's just for Frenchmen. Okay. The law from flesh meat forbids us to eat meat or soup made with meat, but does not forbid the use of fish, seafood, the flesh of cold-blooded animals, such as, turtles, frogs, snakes, I suppose. We could have a rattlesnake barbecue. You get away with it on Friday. We could have frog legs, à volonté, turtles. So what do? Go down to the pet store and just get a couple dozen of them, Oh, how would you like me to, how would you like them, sir? And then, just stuff them, It's like oysters on the half shelf. What is that? It used to be my little pet.
Alligator would be okay too then.
Yeah, alligator tastes like mud. I had that. So it doesn't prohibit then eggs, milk, or foods made from milk, or any condiments made from animal fat. Now, that would be, this is generally written for Catholics of the Latin Rite Church, which is the Western Church. The Eastern Church has its own set of rules, and in fact, when they abstain, they would call it vegan these days. Remember, we used to have just vegetarian, and then they invented a thing called vegan, which vegetarians could eat like eggs and cheese. Vegans cannot. No. Well, the abstinence rules for Eastern Rite Catholics are basically they eat vegan. They can't have cheese. They can't have any of that stuff. So, okay. Who are bound to fast and abstain? Unless lawfully excused or dispense, all who are of the same mind and have, all who are of sane mind and have completed their 14th year are bound to abstain. Because what Jim says it's 18 now. While all, but I mean, what's the difference?
So that's fasting.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're still on 14. While all who have completed their, there we are, 18th year, but not begun their 60th year, that is, who have not reached age 59, are bound to fast. Okay, so they're doing it the European way. See, in Europe, if you're 59, they say you're 60. Because it's like, when you're born, you're in your first year, right? You know how that, it's a little confusing sometimes. It's like, what century is it? Well, it's 700, but that's the 8th century, right? And with, in Europe, if somebody tells you they're 60, it means what we would call 59. So anyway, since the church is based in Italy, Rome, we do the European thing. So when it says, have not entered into their 60th year, it means you haven't turned 59 yet, then you're bound to that. But as soon as you turn 59, therefore being in your 60th year, then you're free on the abstaining. I mean on the fasting. Abstaining just goes on till death do us part, basically. The obligation to abstain continues until the time of death, and maybe for some time thereafter. Unless you were bitten, of course. That's a whole different subject, mini-series. The sick who need meat for the recovery are excused from this obligation. So for example, and that's done different places in the church, people realize that meat is a very good source of, especially red meat, of iron and of protein that helps with certain illnesses. People who, for example, have lost blood or something like that and are generally debilitated would be excused, bless you, from abstaining from meat because they could actually need the meat to get that iron and the protein back. Benedictines, for example, the rule of Saint Benedict prohibits monks from eating meat in general, but allows them if somebody is sick, recognizing that same kind of thing. Others who need meat in order to maintain their strength for really hard work. Miners and construction workers are excused. So farmers, the life of a farmer is a very hard life. A lot of times we don't think too much about it where we are, but I've lived in places where people were farmers. Part of my family were farmers. And they get up with the chickens, because you want to get out in the field early before that hot sun comes up, right? So they get up with the chickens. They work really hard. When the heat of the day happens, they'll come in, they'll have a little rest, and then generally they'll go out after it starts cooling off in the evening. They'll go out and work some more. Well, the point being, when they get up, sometimes even if it's Friday, I think they would be allowed to have some ham and eggs or bacon with the breakfast, because they're going to need every bit of that. And the pure carbs that would be left as the option wouldn't do it for them, wouldn't sustain them through a whole day of hard working in the fields and doing what a farmer does. So that's what they're talking about there. If one doubts whether he is excused from the law, but thinks he may have reason to be dispensed from it, he should see a priest from his parish. Those excused from fasting are those who have not completed their 18th year, meaning those who haven't, in our language, turned 18. See, when you turn 18, you've completed your 18th year. Here I am confusing you all again. But that's what they're talking about. The sick and convalescent, those whose health fasting would notably impair, nursing and expectant mothers. Well, of course, an expectant mother is growing two people, herself and then the baby. She's eating for two. And nursing, well, the milk has to come from somewhere. And so, you can't, I know, you say cows eat grass and they make milk. So why don't pregnant ladies just eat grass? Well, no. But in human terms, think of what milk is made of. It's got a lot of fat in it, it's got protein, it's got vitamin, it's got everything the little baby really needs to live on. That doesn't come from nowhere. It has to come from the things the mother eats. So they let the mother eat whatever she wants, especially before she gives birth. You've heard of the cravings, Sometimes they're outrageous, it's like, I must have sardines with Hershey sauce or something. Well, really, it's a mother's body, many times anyway, sometimes it is nuts, but sometimes it's a mother's body telling her there are certain minerals or oils or components that are missing that her growing baby needs, little building blocks of some kind. And so what they're saying here is, if that includes meat, if it's Friday and your wife is pregnant and she wants hot dogs or something, that should be allowed for, because your body will generally tell you what you did it, huh? Yeah. Huh? What'd you do?
I said I am craving hot dogs.
Anybody bring hot dogs? We'll remember next week, okay?
She hadn't eaten meat for a long, long time. She gave up eating meat. So now she's pregnant, that's all she wants.
Yep.
So that's very interesting.
The best are the Hoffy's quarter-pound hot dogs. You get them at Smart and Final.
Hot dogs.
No, Hoffy's from Smart and Final are the best hot dogs you'll ever have.
They made me go in the middle of the night. She made me go.
There's got to be one on the way home, right? Okay, so those who do manual hard work, the farmers and other kind of things that need the fuel to keep going, and those engaged in useful occupations, if fasting would interfere with the proper performance of their duty. That's kind of broad. A sufficient reason for a dispensation may exist in other cases. For example, of students. In case of doubt, one should consult a priest. When are we bound to fast and abstain? The Church's current regulations in the U.S. require fasting and abstinence from meat on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and abstinence from meat on the Fridays of Lent. And it doesn't mean that you get off scot-free the other Fridays, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, you see, this is all a lot of the modern priests tell their people. Oh yes, Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, and then the Fridays of Lent. That is what we call a half-truth, because there are more to the church's regulations than that. So you have to explain the rest of it. The new code, the new Code of Canon Law, 1983, states that all Fridays through the year and the time of Lent are penitential days and times throughout the universal church. A pastoral statement by the U.S. National Council of Catholic Bishops, November 18, 1966, stated that abstinence is especially recommended on all Fridays of the year, and that self-imposed observance of fasting on all weekdays of Lent is strongly recommended. According to the Modern Catholic Dictionary by Father John A. Hardin, S.J., Imprimatur, 1979, the abolition of Friday abstinence is a common misapprehension. Friday abstinence was not abolished. Rather, the faithful now have a choice either to abstain from meat or perform some other kind of penance on Fridays. According to the Church's law, the substantial observance of Fridays as days of penance, whether by abstinence or in other ways, is a grave obligation. Abstinence from meat is not required on any holy day of obligation, which falls on a day of abstinence. So, like Christmas can fall on Friday. Well, obviously, not only are shouldn't you do any penance on Christmas because it falls on a Friday, you're absolutely forbidden to do any kind of penance on Christmas, even when it falls on a Friday. So you see, these things have to be interpreted according to the situation. So if another holy day of obligation falls on a Friday, like if the Ascension or the Immaculate Conception or the Assumption, or one of those things. Oh no, Ascension is always a Thursday. If Thursday comes on a Friday, you're in trouble. You have to fast. I meant to say the Assumption or the Immaculate Conception falls on a Friday, which they do from time to time. You don't do any penance. And that isn't all. The days following Christmas, big feast days have octaves. And Friday, like let's say Christmas comes on a Monday. Well, the Friday after that's within the octave of Christmas, you don't do any penance either. Because we celebrate major feasts not just for one day, but with a whole week.
Is Friday considered a day of abstinence because it's a day that Christ died?
Yes, that's the reason for it. Christ died on a Friday, and just to remind us of that, the church presents us with this, I don't even call it much penance, it's like a minor inconvenience to remind people of that. And how much trouble really is abstaining from meat? Well, I think the hard part is remembering it's a Friday, right? Especially if you're retired. Well, why? Because when you weren't retired, you went to work every day and you knew what day it was. But when you are retired, one day is much the same as the next, except maybe for Sunday when you remember to go to church. And Fridays could easily happen, and you don't even realize it's Friday because you do kind of the same thing as you do the other days. And so that becomes a little difficult. So, yes, and see, what the bishops did then, they allow you to substitute another penance. Well, they should have left well enough alone, really. I mean, it's like these Novus Ordo priests that tell you, go do something nice for your penance. It's like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? Like, tell me to say a rosary and I'll say a rosary. But when they tell you, like, go do something nice or, something screwy like that, it's like, we don't know what that means. What's something nice? I mean, I hope I'm nice all the time. So do you mean nice? Being nice isn't so entirely out of my character that that's a penance for me. Well, no. So the bishops should have left well enough alone. One of the problems with Vatican II is that all of a sudden everybody was a responsible Catholic citizen, no longer to be treated like a child and be told what to do. Well, That's why we call the church our mother, because she tells us what to do. And we kind of like that, actually. So when they started all this stuff about substituting another penance, well, of course, what happens? People substitute no other penance, and they just forget about it entirely and do what they want to do.
Traditionally, we would have, it's done with fish. And,
Abstinence, day of abstinence.
yeah.
Yes, traditionally it is. It's a very, well, it was in the church, you know. Yeah, Christmas Eve was a fish day and, you know, everything. In our home, because my grandparents were Italians, we had bacalao, dried codfish. Now, my grandmother took her a week to make the, because she bought it, she went down to the old Italian deli place, and it's a wooden box. It comes in a wooden box, and there are all these chunks of stuff in there in salt. Okay, so you have to take out the bacalao and you have to wash it up. Then you put it in water. You cover them up with water. And then you change the water like 75 times a day or something until they're not salty anymore. And then you would cook it with tomato sauce and stuff like that. But that was a big deal because the dried bacalao was like this delicacy kind of thing saved for Christmas. Yeah, they ate it other times. So it was a lot of bother to cook the thing. So we always had that on Christmas Eve. Huh? Oh, well, you know, they made me eat some of that stuff, and but I got sick. So I'm allergic to fish. That's why my mother just thought, you know, you're being bad and not finishing your dinner, you know. But no, then they caught on, and I think I don't know, they'd make me an egg or something. Yeah. Yeah, it worked. Okay. Yes. Abstinence from meat is not required in any holy day of obligation, which I just said. It falls on the day of abstinence. In the new regulations, abstinence is also not required on any solemnity which falls on a Friday of Lent. Well, you see, but that's the new regulations, and so we absolutely don't go by that because, see, they have the feast of St. Joseph, which they now celebrate during Lent. We had a secondary feast of St. Joseph, which was called the Solemnity of St. Joseph, which was the Wednesday after the second Sunday after Easter. Because we didn't break the Lenten fast just because it was St. Joseph's official feast day. We kept the fasting and abstinence for his feast day, and then moved the big whoop-de-doo celebration to after Lent. But the Novus Ordo have now done away with the solemnity of St. Joseph, so they're back to having to try to figure out how to celebrate St. Joseph. So they either celebrate his day in Lent, even if it means on a Friday and you can eat, or they do the St. Joseph the Communist on May Day. Yeah, St. Joseph the Communist. May 1st. Yeah, May 1st. St. Joseph was not a worker. He was a carpenter. He made like chairs and spoons and stuff. But what they wanted to try to identify with the Leninists or something like that. So they made it a feast of St. Joseph because, you know, he was a worker. Comrade Joseph. Yeah. So, as these laws sometimes differ in different places, it is important to find out the diocesan regulations in the matter. Careful attention to the notices read out at church on Sundays will remove most difficulty, except that people don't listen to them. For example now, and these rules do change from place to place, okay? When I moved to Spain, I would say, well, okay, so it's Friday, we can't. And they just, what are you talking about? They've never observed that in Spain. Why? Because as one of the concessions following the Battle of Lepanto, in which the Spanish ships figured very prominently in defeating the Muslims, as part of their reward, they were exempt, and all of descendants were exempt. So that's why Mexicans never heard of abstaining on Friday. Panamanians never heard of it. Argentinians never heard of it. Anywhere that the Spaniards landed and left their children and families and married locally, any descendant of the Spaniards in a country that was once Spanish territory, like for example, it's Mexico or something like that. Now in the United States, they go, okay, well, maybe we were under Spanish, but no, you still have to go by the other rules here. So, yeah, and so they really don't. In fact, not only do they not follow abstaining from meat on Fridays, they've never even heard of it. They had no idea what I was talking about because they've never ever done it. Battle of Lepanto was 1570.
Would that be in Mexico too?
Yes.
But the Mexicans that came to the U.S., they do.
They do. Well, here, because the law here is that you do. The law in Mexico is that you don't have to. But the law, but the bishops will specify what the law is, and the law here. So it doesn't matter if a Mexican is a Mexican, even if he's born there. They're here, and it goes by where you're living. So there were days I had to observe differently living in different parts of Europe. There are days that are holy day of obligation over there, like, I don't know, one place I was living in, and Epiphany was a holy day of obligation. Here it's not, so, but you have to follow the laws of holy day where you are.
You said the privileges of Lepanto, that wasn't one of the privileges, that they're the only ones that can call their children Jesus?
Yes. Yes, they can name their little junior can be called Jesus, just like Daddy was. And, it looks to us like they're being awfully cheeky. Like, where did they get off naming their kids Jesus? But that was one of the privileges of the Battle of Lepanto.
I know, my husband has a cousin, and he's named Jesus, but he felt funny about it. We always call him Jesse, because
They do that. Yeah, usually any Jesse is a Jesus.
like Jesse James.
I think Jesse Jaime would be. Okay, so now violations of this commandment. No food is allowed outside the 3 meals of breakfast, dinner, and supper, or you can make that breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or breakfast, lunch, and supper, that are permitted on a fast day. Liquids which are not generally estimated to be foods do not break the fast. For example, tea, coffee, soft drinks, fruit drinks, milk, etc. are permitted.
What about smoothies?
Well, I think you're pushing it with a smoothie, That would be, we're back to my pizza smoothie now.
Doesn't say here about beer or wine.
Well, no, alcoholic beverages break the fast. You can't do it. They do specify that. Maybe not in anything we've read so far, but it does in the, if you read what the laws are for the diocese. A substantial violation of fasting would occur if the amount of food allowed were exceeded by about 4 ounces. 4 ounces is about 4 ounces would be a piece of meat the size of a pack of cigarettes, basically, would be about 4 ounces. Or a hamburger patty.
Well, certain hamburger patties, not my husband's.
Those are like 2 pounds, right? To eat about 2 ounces of meat on an abstinence day would be a grave violation of the law, unless local diocesan regulations for commuting abstinence to some other penance were being followed. So, as I've said before, and you should know it, you show up for an office party. A lot of places, businesses and things like that, places where people work, have office parties. And leading up to Christmas, Friday is an exceedingly popular day to have pre-Christmas office parties for workplaces. And sometimes all there is to have there has meat in it. You have the most delightful little canapes with filet mignon in them. And, all these little things with meat. In that case, you say an extra decade of the rosary or something, and you say, this is a substitute penance because I can't get out of this, you know? I mean, really, in some of those cases, there's nothing you can do really to get around except not eat. And that might be, as the French say, mal vu, you know, badly seen. So just know that that is a legitimate option. It is just much more in character with the mind of the church, and I think usually easier just not to have meat on Friday. Note, abstinence from meat was formerly traditionally binding from age 7. It is excellent for parents to maintain this practice for their family. Because face it now, it now starts at 14. Well, if you haven't taught your kid to follow abstinence by the time they're 14, I think it's going to be a little hard for them to get into the swing of things. I think you just teach them to do what the rest of the family does, you know? And that's, I think, what should happen most of the time. And then there's no alarming sudden transition to the age of eating meat on Friday, of not eating meat on Friday, when the little kid's been having meat every Friday until they're 14. It doesn't make any sense. So what he's saying is there's a lot of wisdom there. Okay, so the new code states that pastors and parents are to see to it that minors who are not bound by the law of fast and abstinence are educated in an authentic sense of penance. Fasting was formerly binding from age 21. How are we doing? How big is this next part? I can do one more. The former, that is, traditional penitential days. A prominent feature of the church's former discipline, before relaxations of the 1966 and 1983 legislation, was the Ember Days, that is, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday of the weeks that occur at the beginning of each of the 4 seasons. Ember Fridays were formerly days of fast and abstinence. We just had these, like last week. Ember Wednesdays and Saturdays were formerly days of fast and partial abstinence, meaning meat was permitted only at the main meal. The Ember Days of ancient origin were days of fasting for the special sanctification of the 4 seasons and for obtaining God's blessing on the clergy. Well, maybe that's what happened. They occur during the weeks following: the first Sunday in Lent, Pentecost, Whitsun, Holy Cross Day, September 14th, and St. Lucy's Day, December 13th. Fasting and partial abstinence, that's only 3. Oh, first Sunday, okay, I see. Pentecost was the next one. Fasting and partial abstinence were formerly required also in the weekdays of Lent and on the vigil of, that is, the day before Pentecost. In addition to Ash Wednesday, the vigils of the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, and of Christmas, December 25th, were formerly days of fasting and complete abstinence from meat, although December 23rd could be substituted for December 24th. It is praiseworthy to continue the former traditional penitential observances, even though they are no longer obligatory. Penance serves to rectify our self-centeredness, to make up for our sins, our own or those of others, and to strengthen our wills. It can be a very pure form of love for God and can be offered up for the conversion of sinners and for the relief of the souls in purgatory. And we're going to stop there. We'll wait a minute for your mom to get back. Nomo robo. That's it? Okay. We're just waiting. Charlie took a little absent. We're going to just wait for her to come back before we say our prayer. Because I don't want her to feel bad that she missed the prayer. Sorry, we prayed without you. We couldn't wait. Take sure to Russia. Sarah, do you have holy water? No. In your office? I think I have it. I think I just have too much stuff in this bag. Oh, there it is. Got it. I got it. Any questions?
I don't understand the substituting of December 23rd for the 24th.
I guess there might be a reason that you could, do the penances for the vigil of Christmas the day before.
Well, I was thinking maybe because my relatives were Mexican, my in-laws, and their big thing was making tamales on Christmas Eve,
Right.
and that's with meat. So if I
But you don't
knew
eat
that
them
I'm
Christmas
going there
Eve.
to have tamales, I could.
You're supposed to eat them after the midnight mass.
Oh,
Yeah. No, but the reason for the substitution is if Christmas fell on a Monday, the vigil of Christmas would be Sunday, and you can't do the penance then, so you do it the Saturday before, which is the 23rd.
John the 23rd,
What about him?
the 23rd. Pope John the 23rd would be the 23rd or the 24th.
Yeah. Yeah. That was especially see if Christmas fell on a Monday. Maybe we just lost Charlie. Oh well, let's just say it. In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom. The Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Thank you, everybody.